looking at today. You stole $100, so you got to pay $400 back. Why, they'd be finding how many lawyers they could get. In chapter 22, 2 through 4, it says, if a thief be found breaking up and be smitten that he die, there shall no blood be shed for him. Do you understand that? The thief comes in your house and he gets caught and you shoot him, tough luck for him.
Yep.
All right? I know, I understand that's not politically correct, but who cares? What about politics today is correct? Amen. If the sun be risen upon him, there shall be blood shed for him. There shall not make full restitution. For he shall make full restitution. If he have nothing, then he shall be sold for the theft. So if he can't pay back, then he's put on the block and sold. Did you get that? Because that is not politically correct. You know that in this age we live in. If the thief be certainly found in his hand, if the theft be certainly found in his hand alive, whether it be ox or ass or sheep, he shall restore double. So it's called restitution. When you steal, when you break something, when you're responsible for something and it goes bad, you're responsible. Period. According to God, not according to. Verse 5. If a man cause a field or vineyard to be eaten, that is, his cattle get loose and go into that field, and shall put his beast and shall feed the other man's field, or the best of his own field, or the best of his own vineyard, shall he make restitution. Again, simply this: if your cows get loose and they go and eat the other guy's corn, you pay back. It's called restitution. Say, well, he didn't mean to. It doesn't matter. Somebody's got to pay for what was done. And you're responsible. Verse 7, if a man deliver up his neighbor's money or stuff to keep and it be stolen out of the man's house, if the thief be found, let him pay double. So let's just say you leave something in somebody's house, a thief comes in and steal it, he gets found, he pays double back. But if the thief be not found, then the master of the house shall be brought to the judges to see whether he put his hand into his neighbor's goods. So now we go to court. The judge is going to find out if he put his hand to his neighbor's goods, but he lied about it and said somebody else stole it. There's all types of civil infractions. Look at verse 9. For all manners of trespass, whether it be for an ox, for an ass, for a sheep, for raiment, or any other manner of lost things, which another challenges to be his, the cause of both parties shall come before the judges, and whom the judges condemn, he shall pay double to his neighbor. Amen. So he's going to appeal it. I don't see that anywhere in here. The judge was the final. And I think verses 10 through 15 are clear without me going into it, as well as verse 16. I'm not going to that. Verse 18, right in the middle of the civil laws, the Lord says you're not to suffer a witch to live. Imagine that, right in the middle of all that. There's no break, there's no anything. He just says, thou shalt not suffer a witch to live. And that, again, is not politically correct nowadays, especially in Salem, Massachusetts. By the way, this is the first mention of such a person called a witch. And a witch is a woman who makes compact with the devil's practices of sorcery or enchantment. Now, let me just say this. The Bible always assumes that a witch is a person. We're not talking about Hollywood makeup here. God never says, if somebody be said to be one. Okay? A witch is a witch. And besides that, there are no good witches in the Bible. Amen. Turn to Deuteronomy 18. I know the wicked witch of the west and all that kind of stuff. People pay too much attention to the TV and not enough attention to the Bible. 18:10. There shall not be found among you anyone that maketh his son or daughter to pass through the fire, or that uses divination, or is an observer of times. Think on that a while, would you? Or an enchanter, or what? A witch. Never, never does the Bible assume. Turn to Galatians. It's an interesting thing that Paul says back over here in Galatians. And I never really put anything to it until I was doing this study. You know, sometimes you do things when you don't even realize you're doing it. Galatians 5, verse 20. Look at verse 19. Now the works of the flesh, okay, are manifest, which are these: adultery, fornication, uncleanness, lasciviousness, idolatry. Look at that one. People say, well, that witch stuff was the Old Testament. I don't think so. And it still goes on today. And that's why Halloween is a bad, bad holiday. Nothing any Christian should be participating in. A lot of us did it when we were younger because we were ignorant. We didn't know. Nobody told us anything. And then one day we got to reading the Bible, got to studying, realizing, like, wait a minute. This is the wrong kind of stuff. And I hear people say, oh, they're just having fun. Yeah. I got you. I know what you're saying. They're just having fun. But they could have fun doing something else. No. 22:19. Whosoever lieth with a beast shall surely be put to death. Do I need to explain that, or is that clear? Look at look at Leviticus a minute, 20. Just for the sake of terminology, that's called bestiality. People say, well, you shouldn't say that kind of stuff. Why? Why shouldn't you say that kind of stuff? It's happening right around where you live and you just don't know it. I told you years ago that people were going to end up wanting to marry their pets. And that's what they're doing. It starts in California and works its way to New York. I even read an article where a woman married her pet rock. I'm not sure which one's the harder head. You know. I love to watch those vet programs. You know, this is just like my daughter. I'm going, well, why doesn't your daughter talk? And why does she run around on 4 legs? I understand. I've had a dog. I've had several dogs. And yes, they grow on you like a kid. But they're never a kid. All right. I treated them like one. I understand. But they aren't. You just got to get it in your head. All right. Leviticus 20, did I say? Leviticus 20, verse 15. And if any man lie with a beast, he shall surely be put to death, and ye shall slay the beast. Enough. Got it. 22:21. Thou shalt neither vex a stranger nor oppress him, for ye were strangers in the land of Egypt. So the Lord's saying this simply here. To vex means to provoke to anger, annoy, trouble. And listen, I want to be as kind about this statement as I can. It happens in this country all the time. Because somebody isn't like you. Okay. And the Lord says, the reason why I don't want you to do this is you were a stranger in the land once. I don't want you treating them like you got treated. Okay? Just because you got treated that way doesn't mean... I don't go around grabbing pencils out of grown men's pocket and throwing them on the floor and say, go get them, because people did that to me. I've had them say, I'd like to look at your watch. And I give them my watch and they throw it down the gym floor. Then tell me to go get it. Say, what'd you do? I went and got it. Say, I beat the... Yeah, That would have been good. You know what? That's what happened a lot. He was vexed by the filthy communication he heard day by day. Here's one that you probably won't like. Verse 25. If thou lend money to any of my people that is poor by thee, thou shalt not be to him as usurer, neither shalt thou lay upon him as usury. But they could do it to a Jew, a Gentile. Anybody who was ever in the service knew an Eckstein or a Bogenstein or some Stein who was a Jew, and on payday he kept his money, and about halfway through the next week he was loaning his money out to all the guys that didn't have any money. And at 20% back in 1970, now you would. Oh, he did that. Well, David, that's Jewish, I guess. 22:28. Thou shalt not, here's a good one. Thou shalt not revile the gods, nor curse the ruler of the people. So there must be gods if you can't revile them. Look at Psalm 82. Psalm 82. Verse 1. God standeth in the congregation of the mighty. He judgeth among the gods. And look at verse 6. I know on the board I got verse 7, but we'll look at both of them. I have said ye are gods, so he's talking to the people. And all of you are children of the Most High, but ye shall die like men. How you like that one? So these gods aren't men? There's something. Look at Acts 14. I always figured the Lord wouldn't put anything in this book that he didn't have a reason for it. Acts 14, look at verse 11. And when the people saw what Paul had done, they lifted up their voices, saying in the speech of Lycaonia, the gods are come down to us in the what? So these gods didn't look like men in their original state, but they could change their estate. Well, it looks like. Verse 12, and they called Barnabas Jupiter. You say, why did they call him Jupiter? Well, look at chapter 19. This is something the climate people need to read, if they can read. 19:35. And when the town's clerk had appeased the people, he said, Ye men of Ephesus, what man is here that knoweth not how the city of Ephesus is a worshiper? Now watch this. Of the great goddess, there she is, Hollywood, Diana, and of the image that fell down from where? Jupiter. You say, you really think an image fell down? That's what it said. I can't explain all the Bible, but I believe all the Bible. Okay, so that's all we're going to do for now on that. Chapter 22, verse 29. You ready for this one? Thou shalt not delay to offer the first of the ripe fruits and of the liquors. The firstborn of any son shalt thou give unto me. You put the word liquor in the Bible and people automatically go, not a one of them looked up any definitions of the word liquor. I think I got that on the board there for you. The first definition given is any liquid substance as water, milk, blood, sap, juice, or the like. Now where it gets changed is when you start using sugar and yeast. That's where it gets changed. So liquor, in its original state, is just a liquid. All right? Because if you don't do that, then you'll be just like the correctors of the Bible. You'll be running to the Hebrew and everything, trying to find out what's the word liquor. It probably doesn't mean liquor. It probably means donkey. Well, since they can't understand the word ass, well, stick donkey in there somewhere. Amen. And all you got to do is get out a dictionary and look up the word, and you got your answer. Amen. So if you squeezed out the grape juice, you got a liquor. All right. 23:1. Thou shalt not raise a false report. Put not thy hand with the wicked to be unrighteous and an unrighteous witness. So we know what thou shalt not, make a false witness. The Lord doesn't want you lying about something. Look at Proverbs 12 a minute. Harvard and Stanford and some of those colleges started out as training grounds for preachers. Can you imagine Brother Gordy going to Stanford today and teaching any of this? You'd get thrown out on your ear from Harvard. They've already approved of homosexuality and transgender. Guy called me the other day because he read my devotion in the devotional guide. And he said, I just want to tell you, you're right on the spot, man. He said, I went to my doctor the other day, and he said he had paper filled out, and it said, are you a male, a female, or transgender? And he said, I crossed the word transgender out, and I explained to my doctor why I'm a male and why there's a female. Well, he said he's 85. What did he have to lose? All right, what did I say? Proverbs 12? I don't know if I said the chapter or not. Verse 17. He that speaketh truth showeth forth righteousness, but a false witness deceit. Look at verse 29. Whoops. Or 29. Well, wait a minute. You got 22 written down there?
Yeah, as a reference to my Bible. 12:22.
Okay. I must have hit the wrong key again. I checked them back, I thought. I'm going to have you come and check these things out because I don't seem to get them. Lying lips are an abomination to the Lord. Well, I guess that's put some of us in trouble. Unless you've never lied. All right. Proverbs 23:2. I'm sorry. Exodus 23:2. Like I said, somebody needs to do this, not me. Thou shalt not follow a multitude to do evil, neither shalt thou speak in a cause to decline after many to wrest judgment. It's funny, is in my notes I took in class, Doc brought up the Kent State riots, so I just thought I'd throw that in there. Somebody go, the what? Yeah, that's what I figured. That was some of that first stuff where colleges began to rebel against stuff. There was I think 4 or 5 people shot there by the guardsmen. And I had an Uncle Paul who worked at Kent State, and he was security, and he was in the tower, and he told me, he said, Paul, what the news media said happened, I saw it from up there. It didn't happen that way. Well, it never does. The news media is a lie. They've been lying for so many years, they don't even know truth when it jumps up and smacks them in the nose.
Right. Amen.
So that's why I don't pay attention to the news, because they lie. Now let's turn to Romans 13, because I want to show you something. And there's always people trying to get you involved in something. And I think there's a good cause, and if there's a good cause, I think you need to stand up for it and do what's right. But the problem of it is when you get out with a crowd of people, you're labeled as one of them whether you are or not. So 13:13, he said, Romans 13:13, let us walk honestly as in the day. And then he says, not in rioting, in drunkenness, not in chambering. You know what a chamber is, right? Okay. And wantonness, not in strife or envying. So the Lord tells us that we don't have any business rioting. Have you ever wondered how many Christians there are out in those groups? Well, I think we ought to, get rid of all the politicians. Well, I do too, but burning up vehicles isn't a way to do that. I think you got a right to speak up. America was founded on that. You got a right to speak up. Used to be a town square, and you could stand up on the stool and say your part. And now you can't even say it on the street corner, or somebody will bash you with a ball bat or something. So, anyways, so much for that. 23:4. If thou meet thine enemy's ox or his ass going astray, thou shalt surely bring it back to him. So it's not finders, keepers, losers, weepers. You ever hear that? When I was a kid, I remember that from being a kid. Finders, keepers, losers, weepers. It's mine now. Not according to the Bible. Here's bringing this ox down the road. What did you do? I found this ox. Finders, keepers, losers, weepers. Notice how simply the Bible straightens out a lot of your thoughts. All right, chapter 23, verse 10. In 6 years thou shalt sow thy land and shalt gather in the fruit, but in the 7th year thou shalt let it rest and lie still, and the poor of thy people may eat what they have, leave the beast of the field shall eat. In like manner thou shalt deal with thy vineyard and with thy olive yard. So simply this, it would really be a test of your faith, would it not? Amen. Lord said you sow your field for 6 years, and the 7th year you don't sow, and you leave it for the poor and the beast and whatever to take care of. And then in the 8th year you sow, and I'll increase your growth. So which really meant that 2 years you don't partake of it. Imagine letting your ground rest. What the idea was, the Lord said, let the ground rest for a year. You've been sowing it for 6 years. Let it rest for a year. And that was going to be the plan the Lord had set up for when they went into the land. But that didn't work out either. Look at Leviticus 25 a minute. Leviticus 25, verse 1. The Lord spake unto Moses in Mount Sinai, saying, so it's one of his trips up the hill, speak unto the children of Israel, and say unto them, when ye come into the land which I give you, then shall the land keep a Sabbath unto the Lord. So when you're talking about the Sabbath, there's a Sabbath nobody talks about. That was a land Sabbath. On the 7th year it rested. 6 years shalt thou sow thy field, 6 years shalt thou prune the vineyard, and gather in the fruit thereof. But in the 7th year shall be a Sabbath of rest in the land, a Sabbath for the Lord. Thou shalt neither sow thy field nor prune thy vineyard. That which groweth of its own accord of harvest shalt thou not reap, neither gather the grapes or the vine undressed, for it is a year of rest unto the land. And the Sabbath of the land shall be meat for you, for thee, and for thy servant, and for thy maid, and for thy hired servant, and for thy strangers that sojourn with thee, and for thy cattle, and for his beasts, and so forth. So the Lord had a plan all set up, how they could sustain themselves and give the land rest, but it didn't. 23:13. In all things that I have said unto thee, be circumspect, and make no mention of the name of other gods. Wow. You weren't even to talk about them. And the reason why is, if you do that, it leads to investigation. When you investigate, you get in trouble by following it. And the Lord said, just don't talk about it. You know what Paul said, simple concerning the evil? There's some things that shouldn't be talked about. Okay, there's just some things that go on in our society that just don't need to be talked about. Why? Well, what would they do that for? Well, where do they go with that? And next thing you know, you're investigating, and you find out things you don't want to know, and you're cramming stuff into your brain you'll never get out. We would do well to go back to the book. And here, brethren, as I teach these lessons to you, I want you to keep in mind that some of the brethren don't believe that stuff in the Old Testament needs to be followed. And I haven't yet to figure out the word all. I'm not sure what all means. I always figured all meant all. But I'm finding out that all doesn't really mean all. For all have sinned, some of us haven't. If we take their analogy of things. Okay. Y'all are looking at me like, what's he talking about? 23:14. 3 times thou shalt keep a feast unto me in the year. Thou shalt keep the feast of unleavened bread, which would be the Passover. Thou shalt eat the unleavened bread 7 days, as commanded thee in the time appointed on the month of Abib, for it thou camest out of Egypt. None shall appear before me empty. And the feast of harvest, which is tabernacles, the first fruits of thy labors which thou hast grown in the field, and the feast of ingatherings, that's pretty clear right there, which is in the end of the year thou hast gathered in thy labors out of the field. 3 times in the year all males shall appear before the Lord. And he tells them they shouldn't appear empty. When you come before the Lord, you got to have something. So as I said, the unleavened bread is the Passover. The first fruits is the fruit of Feast of Harvest. It's Pentecost. And then the Feast of Ingatherings is Tabernacles, and that's usually like late in the fall. And the male was to come before the Lord, not to appear empty. I've often wondered if that had anything to do with us standing before the judgment seat of Christ. Are we going to take anything? Have we sent anything ahead of ourselves? Maybe you don't get it. I don't know. 23:20. Behold, I send an angel before thee to keep thee in the way and to bring thee into the place which I prepared. Beware of him. I think that's a warning. Beware of him and obey his voice. Provoke him not, for he will not pardon your transgressions, for my name is in him. He couldn't pardon them because he hadn't died yet. He said, I'm going to send you this angel, but you better pay attention to what he tells you to do. And again, we know the history of Israel and what happened. And because they didn't, they ended up in captivity and lost their land and lost their name and lost their privileges and eventually ended up in concentration camps in Germany. 23:23. For mine angel shall go before thee and will bring thee into the Amorites, unto the Amorites and the Hittites and the Perizzites and the Canaanites and the Hivites and the Jebusites, and I will bless them and give them a good home and pat them on the back and say, good, glad you guys are here. There's just a whole lot that you just have to be careful. People say, God loves everybody. Better read it again. I suggest you get in the Bible and read it and quit quoting Joyce Myers. Or Frederick, whatever his name is. Those guys say just enough truth to make people follow them. 23:24. Thou shalt not bow down to their gods, nor serve them, nor do after their works. But thou shalt utterly overthrow them and quite break down their images. God told his people, listen to me carefully, please. God told his people not to follow after their works. Do not after their works. Whatever it is they do, don't do it. Does anybody get the analogy here? What's got us in trouble in America? We did after the heathen, after their works. And it's got us in trouble. I know that doesn't make people happy. 25, verse 25. And ye shall serve the Lord your God, and he shall bless thy bread and thy water, and I will take sickness, watch, follow me, and I will take sickness away from the midst of thee. Wouldn't that be a blessing? Amen. Wouldn't that be a blessing if we got up tomorrow and there was just no more sickness and you were in the best health you've ever been in just overnight? Wouldn't that be great? Okay, well, there's a way to do that, but there shall nothing cast their young nor be barren, so you're always going to get your calf in the land, and the number of days I will fulfill. I will send my fear before thee, and will destroy all the people to whom thou shalt come, and he's going to what? He's going to destroy all the people to whom thou shalt come? And I will make all thine enemies turn their back unto thee. Well, it didn't happen yet. And I will send, I was like Harold Leake's song. I will send hornets before thee, which shall drive out the Hivites and the Canaanites and the Hittites from before thee, and I guess the rest of them have already run. And I will not drive them out from before thee in 1 year, lest the land become desolate and the beasts of the field multiply against thee. By little and little I will drive them out from before thee, until thou be increased and inherit the land. That's what God said he would do to them. Of course, you know, it all was contingent upon the fact that they obeyed what he said and did what he told them to do. But just that first statement, I will take sickness away from the midst of thee. I thought, wouldn't that be a blessing? I don't know how many years you've spent sick, but I've spent enough of them. And I'm not complaining, because as long as I'm feeling sick, I'm still alive. There is an altar to that, you know. And then chapter 24 is kind of like Acts 2. We're getting into a change as we change from how men do things, and men are starting to be held accountable now. I'm not really, it's like I said, I'm just reading my note here. I'm not really going to go into all this because it's pretty self-explanatory as you read through it. Hard sometimes to believe, but it is what it is. See, notice what he says in verse 32, and that's not even part of it, but look at it. Thou shalt make no covenant with them. Now watch. Nor with their gods. People say, well, the gods, that's all Greek mythology. No, I'm sure the Greeks got into it, and some did some of the others, but it was Bible truth before it was Greek mythology. And I don't know if you've ever read anything on Greek mythology, but when I was writing a couple of my books, I had to do a little diving into the Greek mythology, and it just was terribly interesting to see how some of the stuff they talked about was in the Bible. So all mythology isn't false. And the devil would love nothing more. Americans serve their gods. They have them. They have them out in California. They're called Hollywood. That's their gods. They serve these people. If some god decides to cut off her hair, then a bunch of women cut their hair off. If some guy decides to get spiked hair, then all the guys start getting spiked hair.
Amen.
Okay. I didn't mean to comment on that. You can take that off of there. You want to erase that off of there? Yeah. Chapter 24, verse 10. And they saw the God of Israel. There was under his feet, as it were, a paved work of sapphire stone, and as it were, the body of heavens in his clearness. And upon the nobles of the children of Israel he laid not his hand. Also they saw God and did eat and drink. There's an unusual event. It's a picture of the third heaven, what you got here, this sapphire stuff. And I'm not going to turn there, but if you look up the references in Revelation 4:1 through 4 and 5:15, you'll find some description of what it's like under the feet of Jesus Christ. And I don't know what it's going to look like when we get to heaven. I have no idea what what we're going to see. I read what I believe, but I don't know if I saw it, if I'd believe it, because it's going to be more than my eyes can handle. Now, the nice thing about it is when we get ready to go to heaven, we're going to get a changed body. So we'll be able to handle what we see. But right now, you couldn't handle it. That's why they said if a man looked on God, he was going to die. Well, that's not necessarily the case. Here, chapter 24, verse 11 says, and upon the nobles of the children of Israel, he laid not his hand. Also, they saw God. So there are people who saw God. We have some listed names. Samson's folks saw God. Gideon saw God. Isaiah saw God. And then there's a list here. And right here you have these nobles which no names are given, and they saw God. So I'm going to say that God is particular in what he does. And he can show himself and you don't die. Or he can show himself and you die. And the thing about it is, I don't recall reading in the Bible, somebody correct me if I'm wrong. I have been wrong, I think. I don't recall reading in the Bible anywhere where anybody who saw God dropped dead. But I do remember reading some who lied to God and dropped dead. So maybe there is a case in there. If there is, if you'll point it out to me, I'll surely correct myself, but I don't recall that. So what are you saying? Well, it was just a thought. It was understood by people that if you saw God. Remember when Moses came down from the mountain and he went to talk to the people and they couldn't look at him because he was glowing and he had to put a veil over his face and talk to them? So there is that part that's happened. Chapters 25 through 31, and again, a lot of stuff, I don't have any notes in my Bible in some of these areas, deals with the tabernacle and its furnishings. And look at verse 9 here in chapter 25. It says, according to all that I showed thee after the pattern of the tabernacle and after the pattern of the instruments thereof, even so shall you make it. So when Moses goes to the mountain, God gives him a picture, or God shows him, I'm not sure which, God shows him the tabernacle in heaven. And he said, this is how I want the tabernacle built down here. He said, after the pattern that you see. I'll turn over to Hebrews chapter 8 a minute. Now, I can tell you right now, there's multitudes of people who call themselves Christians who have no idea in the world what I'm talking about. They don't know why. Nobody ever teaches it to them. Verse 1, chapter 8. Now the things which we have spoken, this is the sum. So this is the answer. We have such a high priest who is gone to sit on the right hand of the throne of the majesty in heavens, a minister of the sanctuary and of the true tabernacle. Got that? Which the Lord pitched in what? So he's got a tabernacle which the Lord pitched, and he said to Moses, this is the pattern after which you will make it. For every high priest is ordained to offer gifts and sacrifices, whereof it is necessary that this man have somewhat also to offer. For if he were on the earth, he should not be a priest, seeing that there's a priest that offers the gifts according to the law, who serveth an example, the shadow of heavenly things, as Moses was admonished of God when he was about to make the tabernacle. So here's the Lord doing this. This is an admonishment now. That's what he said, right? See, saith he, that thou make all things according to the pattern showed thee in the mount. He said, Moses, when you get ready to make this thing, don't you decide to make it your way. Can I tell you there's some things that can't be changed, but people change them anyways. His admonishment was, see that you make it exactly like I showed you. Now, chapter 9, verse 1. Then verily the first covenant had also ordinances of divine service and a worldly sanctuary. Not worldly in the sense of like the world, but it was on this earth. For there was a tabernacle made, the first wherein was the candlestick and the table and the showbread, which is called the sanctuary. And after the second veil, the tabernacle, which is called the holiest of all, we call it the Holy of Holies, which has the golden censer, the ark, the covenant over later on about with gold. Herein was the golden pot, had manna and Aaron's rod that budded, and the table of the covenant. And it is interesting, he mentioned an Aaron's rod that budded. We'll talk about that later. And over it the cherubims of glory, shadowing the mercy seat, of which we cannot now speak particularly. Interesting statement. Now when these things were thus ordained, the priests went in out of the first tabernacle, accomplishing the service of God. But under the second went the high priest alone once every year, not without blood, which he offered for himself and for the heirs of the people. And the Holy Ghost is thus signifying the way into the holiest of all was not yet made manifest, while as the first tabernacle was yet standing, which was a figure of the time then present, in which were offered both gifts and sacrifices that could not make him that did the service perfect as pertaining to the conscience, which stood not only in the meats and drinks, and the divers washings, different kinds of ways to wash things, and the carnal ordinances imposed upon them till the time of Reformation. There's a deep verse. But Christ, being come a high priest for good things to come by the greater and more perfect tabernacle, not made with hands, that is to say, not of this building, neither by the blood of bulls and calves, but by his own blood he entered once in the holy place, having obtained eternal redemption for us. So he says to Moses, I'm going to admonish you, you make this exactly like I showed you. Why? Because Christ, when he left here, went there, that's where he went. Verse 23, verse 24, we're just about done. It is therefore necessary that the pattern of things in the heavens should be purified with these, but the heavenly things themselves have better sacrifice than these. For Christ is not entered into the holy place made with hands. There it is again, not the earthly tabernacle. Hey, religious people, it's not this building. You can't keep Christ in a box in the back room, which was the figure of the true, but also heaven itself, now to appear in the presence of God for us. Don't have time to discuss it. We've got to get class over here in a minute. But in chapter 25, verse 2, he says, speaking of the children of Israel, they bring me an offering, and every man that giveth it willingly. So there's the free will offering. Everybody with me? There's the free will offering. And gold is deity, silver, we know redemption, brass is said to be judgment. Verse 4 and 5, he talks about the colors there. He said blue equals heaven, purple is royalty, scarlet is blood. And notice the goat's hair. He didn't say goat's skin. And all that time he said the skin of the badger and the skin of this and the skin of that and the skin of that. But he doesn't, when he gets to the goat, he says hair. Now, I don't know what that's about, but I know what Paul says about hair in 1 Corinthians 12. But whether there's a connection, don't have an answer.
Women take goat's hair and spin it?
They might, yeah. Somebody suggested that. One of the things I read suggested that. And also, the goat was a picture of the scapegoat, carried away sin. But I don't know that anybody's got an exact. There's a book I've got by a guy named Soltou. I think it's Soltou. I think it's his last name. And it's called The Tabernacle. And it's pretty rich. I don't know that I get everything he says, but it's pretty rich. So it could be, Gordy, could be. Because they did spin a lot of stuff like that. Okay, 25:9. According to all I showed thee, we've talked about that. We're not talking anymore. In 25, I think I'm missing something there. First piece of furniture built for the tabernacle was the ark. You can read it there for yourself. And each of the articles, the ark, the table of showbread, and the altar of incense all had a gold crown on them. Oh, that's what happened. I got it out of order. And these items, the table of showbread and the ark, and the altar of incense, all of them, if you read about them, they have a ring at each corner. And then there's a stave in the rings that's gold covered. And that was to all those articles were never to be removed, that stave. And look real quick. Let's see, where is it at here? Yeah, Numbers 4. We'll look at this and then we'll get done here. Numbers 4. You know, there's just some things that are sacred, and God makes them that way. Numbers 4, look at verse 15. No, that's not what I wanted. Numbers 4, verse 15. Oh, okay. Yes, it is verse 15. Okay. And when Aaron and his sons had made an end of covering the sanctuary, so Aaron and his sons went in when they got ready to move and covered everything in the sanctuary. That's why you have all those different skins and different colors for different things. And at the end of covering the sanctuary shall all the vessels of the sanctuary as the camp is set forward. After that, the sons of Kohath come to bear it, but they are not to touch any holy things, lest they what? So when David went to recover the ark the first time, and he got the priests with the staves, and they carried it out, but they put it on a new cart, remember? Mm-hmm. And then that cart, the oxen made it jiggle, and Uzzah put his hand up there to stop it, and the Lord killed him. Why? Not supposed to touch those items. All right? Okay, and the mercy seat was the next thing to be built. 2 cherubims set there as well. Table of showbread, he gives the size of it, and it pictures, table of showbread pictures 2 rows of 66. So we have 66 books, right? You give us this day our daily bread, right? And the next item for the tabernacle is the golden candlestick. It was to be made after the pattern, as all of it was. There we go.